Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Man, I'm excited about this one. I am excited about this one. We already had a full conversation. So we are prepped, ready to go. I want to say thank you to all our listeners here on the Transition Podcast who've been tuning in. The goal is to inspire greatness to impact generations. And we got a special guest today, my boy, my brother, Dr. Ramar Henderson. Um, Man, I just appreciate you, bro, for just being here. I appreciate you for being willing to have a conversation with me.
No doubt, big dog. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I know it's all love, and I know, what we talk about is gonna bless your listeners above and beyond.
Absolutely, bro. Absolutely, man. So just a brief background. I got my notes here ready to go. Hailing from Carson, California, Long Beach, California, to LBC, holding it down. Yes, sir. Hey, I ran track in Poly too, man. I spent some time out in Long Beach too, brother.
Hey, man, I'm not gonna lie to you, brother. Them jackrabbits are hard to catch, brother. They was lighting us up in the Moore League 24/7, 365.
So
So I got
where'd
mad
you go to high
respect.
school? Where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school at Lakewood High.
Yes,
So,
sir.
there's a Lakewood Atlanta, so you understand? You understand the dig? Yes,
I
sir.
I do. And so you ran a little bit of track, played a little bit of basketball.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So ran track all 4 years, and I hooped until 11th grade, right? And then, I was unfortunate I couldn't hoop in my senior year. But interesting though, good brother, is that, I'm pretty sure we'll get into it. I came from parents, they didn't let me really play sports, until the 8th grade. You know what I mean? Because I came from two parents that was like, yo, academics first, sports second. You know what I mean? So, I always would wonder what would it look like had I would have gotten to the game, earlier, like some of my peoples. You know what I mean?
Do and to your credit, man, you are in a game. You are Dr. Raymar Henderson,
I
bro. You are
appreciate that.
you are in the game, man. And just a little backstory on how we met. We had some mutual friends over at Fresno State University, and you were a professor over at Fresno State University. You got your master's degree, you got your doctorates, went on and get your doctorates. Excuse me, you went on and got your doctorates. That's like next level, brother. That's in the game. That's in the
Yes,
game,
sir.
man. That's
Yes,
in
sir.
the game, black man. You got your doctorates. You are currently, and I'm gonna get this right, psychotherapist.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A
So
little bit about,
currently,
yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
brother, so when I got my master's, brother, I was at Long Beach State, and I was struggling. I was struggling in a lot of different ways. I got my undergraduate at Sac State, and I was gonna try to make that push to see, like, okay, what would this hooping thing look like? I was playing in some pretty competitive open runs and stuff like that. And coming to Long Beach State, I was lost, bro. Because
Mm.
I had made a decision, like, just like some things we're gonna talk about. Like, so do I want to continue to chase trying to get to the league or try to play overseas? Or, right, do I want to go ahead and get this advanced degree? And so I decided to get the advanced degree. And I won't lie to you, man. The first year and a half of my master's program, I was like, man, this can't be the finality of my education.
Mm.
And then I was able to meet a black psychologist by the name of Joseph L. White. And he poured into me, man. He was the first person to tell me that I get a PhD, brother.
Oof.
And from there, the rest was history. You know what I'm saying? And so that's just a little bit of why I got in the game. So when you say about psychotherapists, you know, brother Isaiah, I told myself, man, because getting a PhD was no easy task, but I told myself that I wanted to work with people like myself, right? If I could have talked to somebody like me when I was going through what I was going through,
Mm.
what I mean? I think I would have been a lot better off. And so part of working with mental health, part of my desire to work with student athletes, elite athletes, part of my desire to serve Black folks, man, is just that, right? It's really to be a servant,
Mm.
having somebody that looks like you in the room, having somebody who has a healthy racial identity, who understands Blackness and how that ties into all these different things in the room is really how I see myself as a psychotherapist, man. And so you get me. So the same thing you're getting from this podcast is what I look like when I'm working with folks one on one.
And man, you have been just a blessing in my life. You know, we already talked about it offline. As soon as you stepped into my life, man, it was an opportunity for me to engage with other Black men who understood, the lifestyle, the sports lifestyle. And I was able to look to you and even look up at you like, man, this brother has done something that I'm sure not a large percentage of the population, not even just Black folks in general, but the population, have
Correct.
been able to accomplish and going on and getting your PhD, and especially one who has been serving athletes, man. And we talk about the transition. You were clear, you were precise, and you were raw and honest with me, bro. Every little
Correct.
conversation we had, I was able to gain some insight and some knowledge. And it's just been a blessing to be able to share space. It's been a blessing to be able to just kind of pick your brain on some things that has allowed me to get to that next level. And so, man, I'm grateful for you. And so, Doc, when you talk about your mentor at that time saying, "Hey, you can go get your PhD," right? Were there other individuals around you? Was there any other sort of exposure to individuals who you may have known to get their PhD, especially Black folks, Black men getting their PhD? Or how was that? How was that process, man? How was that process?
Brother, let me tell you a story if I may, good brother. So I remember like it was yesterday. So I have a at the time, my a member of my thesis, he's married to at the time a staff psychologist at UC Irvine, Dr. Harishina, who is now working at Long Beach State. And she said so clearly, she said, Raymar, you need to go meet Joe White, Dr. White. And I was like, yeah. So I came, bro, and I was just like, no way, bro. To date, I was like, man, I never met another Black psych. It was cool, right? Because we know how we can get sometimes, right? We get the degree, we get up there, and we forget where we come from, right? But Dr. White he was different in that respect. So Dr. White and I met. We met at Islands Burgers in Irvine. And first thing he told me, man, he said, "Tell your mama that this ain't no weird stuff. I'm looking out for, brother." Right? And I said, 100%. You know what I mean? And he said another thing I'll never forget. He said, "I don't want nothing from you." He said, "Only thing I want is for you to pay it forward." Which is why when you asked me to be on your show, brother, I said no problem at all. And then from there, brother, he introduced me to all of his mentees, right? Some are lawyers, some are psychologists, some are college presidents, so forth and so on. And all Black men, good brother. And
Sir.
so being able to see Black men who was keeping it all the way a stack, right? While teaching me how to be a professional, man, these things were invaluable to me, good brother. And it really taught me that I could do it too, right? And I'll be remiss if I didn't say this as well, man. I want to lift up my pops, man. So while, my pops, blue collar, Marine, he was also able to help me understand what it meant to persevere and never quit. You know what I mean? And so when you ask me about professionals that I saw, and these are professionals that I saw, good brother. I know right now we got the beef between Drake and K Dot. How many young people are going to be able to walk up to a Drake or a Kendrick?
Yeah.
On the other hand, you could walk up to a Black psychologist, right? Or a Black man with a PhD. right, or a black professor and say, yo, hey man, let's break bread. Let's go get a vegan meal. You know what I mean? And really talk about life, talk about the next steps, bro. And that was the experiences that were afforded to me, big dog.
Did you get a lot of individuals, did you get a lot of athletes or individuals that play sports that had that proximity to you and said, hey, whether they were unsure about how to perform at a high level or whether they were coming out of a transition period, how is your work with servant athletes been with your expertise in your field? How's that been for you, bro?
It's been awesome, bro. One of the first times I got like hands-on experience, big dog, was at Cal State Fullerton.
Yeah.
It was an optional talk that I gave to the track team, right? So uh, head coach was there, assistant coach was there, and quiet as kept, maybe about 15 to 20 athletes, right? It was free. And I was excited to be on, man. So I was like, yo, man, I guess my first opportunity. And I talked about goal setting, right? And I talked about the ability to set goals, right? Process goals, intermediate goals, and long distance goals. And when you work in this space, brother Isaiah, it's kind of you have to learn as a consultant, like how do you communicate with elite athletes in ways that they can understand, right? Because anybody can read a book. Not everybody can translate what's in that book and make it applicable, right? And
Real.
so, as I was preparing, man, I was super nervous. But when I got out there, I was like, man, I've been here, I've done this, right? So let me take a different approach to how I was talking to these athletes. And aside from the nonverbals, like the head nods, it was late in May. Coach came up to me, man. He said, I just want to let you know, uh, either 4 or 5 of these student athletes, man, that made it to the quarters of the N2A, and they attribute your talk to some of their success, bro.
Um,
And man, that was the biggest boost, man, because it was unsolicited, my brother. It
um,
was unsolicited. And like, for example, a lot of the brothers that I work with, because I work with all sports, but I've been extremely successful working with a lot of basketball players. And just having basketball brothers, man, to really circle back, whether they add me on social, just to have some of these real conversations. And it's just been beautiful, man. So I've had access, and I anticipate I will continue to have access to a lot of athletes in
and,
that
and
regard.
and that's where that's where you and I connected, understanding that intersection between athletics. And I was just coming out of my transition when I was actually still in my transition when you and I connected. Um, and when you talk about those short-term goals, when you talk about those those intermediate goals, when you talk about those long-term goals. One of the conversations we had on the podcast not too long ago was growing up, right? When we were just jumping out the sandbox, getting ready to play sports or looking to play sports, right? We identified ourselves as athletes, right? And once we identified ourselves as athletes, there was a long-term goal. And the long-term goal was to get to the big leagues, whether that be get to the NBA, whether that be get to the MLB. For me, it was get to the NFL, right? This long-term goal. And, intermediate wise, go to school, make sure you got your good grades because that's the only way, right? And then you want to go to college, etc. So following this chain of command. And so your time of working with athletes, bro, like that conversation being so impactful, like what was so impactful? And I don't even know if you remember that conversation, bro, but you remember that conversation, man?
I do remember it, brother.
So when you're talking about working with athletes and saying, hey, these are some short term, long term, intermediate, like what does that look like, especially for those of us who are jumping off the porch with this one long term goal?
Brother, as we were game planning for this episode, I always go back and forth, and I'll share with you what was a philosophical game changer for me
Mm,
and what was informing me as we were having that conversation, good brother. I never forget. It was 2011. It was 2011 for sure, and it was at the American Psychological Association. I believe it was in Washington, D.C. And so I talked about Dr. White, right? But in proximity, a professor at Long Beach State was Dr. Michael Connor. And Dr. Connor had told me we would have this, we were so tapped in, brother, as mentor and mentee that we would have at least 3 to 4 lunches every conference, right?
mm,
We'd just be debriefing. And I never forget, Dr. Connor was just sharing with me, he always shared, but particularly he was sharing about his work with athletes. And he asked me a question, brother. And you know how sometimes, you want to fit in, somebody asks you a question, you be trying to skate around it. And like, he asked me a question that I couldn't skate, brother. And
couldn't
this is
get
what he
around.
couldn't get around it, bro. He said, Doc, future Doc. He said, future Doc.
Mm,
And he said, do you want to help brothers get off the plantation?
mm.
Or do you want to help brothers stay on the plantation?
Ooh,
Bruh.
ooh. You might
So
have
this
to go ahead. Let me hear your answer.
so bro, I was mid chicken wing, bro. I was mid chicken wing, so I put it down, man. And I had to look him in his face. And I thought about it, man. No matter how, because at that time, I had the experience at Fullerton, right? And I was getting some experiences at Southern Illinois where I was going to school at, right? And I thought about it, how can I honor myself and honor, the people like me? And I said, Dr. Khan, I want to help them get off the plantation.
Mm,
And most people, when they hear that though, brother Isaiah, man, they'll say that, I mean, he's anti-sport. And I'm not anti-sport, right? I'm anti-complete development, right? Because I think sport is an amazing opportunity to completely develop folk, right? But we just spend a lot of time on this physical prowess, right? Which is something that leaves brothers incomplete,
yeah,
right? How can because we know that window, right, for a leaguer, whether it's MLB, NFL, NBA, right, is 5 or less if you're lucky, right? And
yes,
so really kind of thinking about what does a complete Isaiah look like? What does a complete Raymar look like? So really kind of thinking about that, brother. And so when I'm speaking to student athletes or athletes in general, bro, I want to lift up their humanity. I want to talk about, okay, you got this skill set, right, to persevere at an elite level, right? What does it look like to shift that just a little bit as a professional, right? Or being able to kind of talk about some of those different things, good brother. And so when I'm talking about those goals, right, if we're talking sports specific, it's really breaking down that emotional, that psychological, and that physical part of how they exist, right, in their sport,
ooh,
right?
that's deep. That's deep.
Yeah,
That's deep. I know, one of the conversations you and I had where we talk about, and we'll get into the identity foreclosure and the way I've understood identity foreclosure, you're the first person to bring that even to my consciousness, my awareness. Like, I understood identity foreclosure as someone who was transitioning out of the league, right? That this sports identity was it was now coming to a close, and I had to now figure out who Isaiah is outside of sport. And so as I started to read a little bit of, within this identity foreclosure, I then started to shift the understanding of like this. It almost sounded like identity foreclosure was something that happens at an earlier age when we decide
correct,
to wrap our whole identity up into one thing, which has been sport. And in our last podcast,
correct.
Scott, we talked about I had a couple of our guys on. So it was like 8, 9, 10 years old. We're like, this is what we want to do, and we're putting all of our eggs in one basket. And
Correct.
what I've understood identity foreclosure to be, and I'd love for you to speak on it if I'm in the right direction, is once we put all our eggs in one basket, we're foreclosing on any other identity that we may have. And we do, there's multiple facets of us, but we're singularly focusing on this is who we are, and we're wrapping ourselves up in this one thing. And once it's over, then it becomes, well, damn, who the hell am
It's a
I?
wrap.
Who the hell
Correct.
am I on par,
Correct, bro.
bro?
Brother, that's like a alley-oop, brother. That's one of them Chris Paul, Blake Griffin alley-oops, bro. So I'm hopefully I can just tear the rim off, right?
Oh,
So, yes, sir. Just shake it, bro. And so I want us to think about. I love the fact that you introduced adolescence, right? And so when we think about young adolescents, right? So I said it earlier, when we're looking at Braun, right? Are we looking at Mamba, right? Thinking like, okay, I'm gonna put all my resources into developing into my version of Braun, Mamba, Jordan, Ja, so forth and so on, right? Now, when we think about it, right, when you went to Fresno State, good brother, when I went to Sac State, Humboldt State, my brother, the term, as I do believe, unless it's changed now, and it could have changed last night, you know what I mean? It's scholar athlete,
yes,
right?
sir.
So it's supposed to, that's at least, right, in the formal sense, a dual identity, right? And even in K through 12, it's positioned that way as well, right? You're a student athlete, right? So let's think about this identity. And student is first, not athlete. You're not an athlete student, you're a student athlete. So when we think about, all right, hmm, how do I develop critical thinking, right? Well, if it doesn't pertain, as far as the DB sense, if it doesn't pertain to the ability to read schemes on the football field, then what I need to learn math for?
Mm.
What do I need to learn critical thinking for?
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying? What do I
Ooh.
need to learn about history, right?
Ooh.
So
I
forth and
said
so
that the
on.
other day, Doc. I said that the other day. I was like, history did not, it didn't pertain to where I was going. I said this 2 days ago. Oh, I love history now because it's relevant to how I'm identifying myself, right? The
Correct.
history. But you're absolutely right, bro. I had to cut you off. You absolutely right.
Correct. Now, I appreciate that, brother. Because if something moves you, bro, you gotta let it loose. I'm not gonna get offended, good brother. And
Man.
so, so I'm gonna build on what you just said about history, right? So if we think about the history, right, of student athletes, right, if we're thinking in the 1960s, a lot of these into Jesse Owens, right? A lot of, what I'm saying, Arthur Ashe, right? A lot of these folk, right, were scholars and they had other identities as activists, right? Moving at the grassroots level, right? And so really kind of thinking about, okay, Wilma Randolph. So a lot of folks, bro, have multiple identities, right? On the other hand, when we position athletics, right? The question I have is, can it be framed in more than one way, right? To where we're developing completeness with the folks who are engaging, right, in athletics, right? So let's think about this. And this is one of the things I talk about, and I'm very candid, with the folks that I work with. When we talk about, the Poly Jackrabbits, right? Or the Alabama Crimson Tide, right? Folks are taught to assert their physical prowess,
Yeah.
right? So why are folks being taught to assert their bodies and not their minds, right? Just imagine if you asserted your mentals as much as you asserted your physical body.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. You'd be a more well-rounded package on
Correct.
in life, not just on the fields or on the courts. You'd have it, it wasn't until I exited the league, bro, in 2016, 2017, where I said this, and I'll say this on record. I didn't make $1 million on the field. Once I retired, though, I said this and I wrote it down. I said, I'm going to make $1 million off the field with my mind. I said that. And I'm learning how much of a practice it is to be mentally strong. And again, sports help develop a lot of skills, a lot of tools when you're talking about developing, your mental capacity, right? When you're developing your mental sharpness, right? But again, it felt like once sport ended from the physical level, from the physical capacity, it was okay. Now I have to apply my mind, right? Now I have to apply my thought. Now I have to apply these beliefs in a way that I may have not had to before when I was singularly focused on sport.
Correct. Correct. And the thing is, good brother, is like there's not a coach that will walk into a locker room and say, "Hey, I'm going to explicitly teach you to, foreclose right on your intellectual aptitude, right, your intellectual faculties, right." No coach is going to say that, right? On the other hand, though, brother, if we look at these systems, right, bigger, stronger, faster, right? Where is the other parts of who this student might be, or
Mm,
who this athlete might be,
correct.
right? In the realm of bigger, stronger, faster, right? So really kind of thinking about, all right, how can we also include other components, right? Financial literacy,
Right.
right? Emotional regulation, right? In addition to all these other identities, right? And be selfless in how we're instituting systems to develop these folks.
That's
Right?
good. That's really good.
No matter if you score a TD, are you locking you strapping up the best receiver, right? That's awesome, right? But see, what's even more awesome is, are you more complete than when you came in,
Mm,
leaving,
that's good. That's good.
right? And really kind of thinking about that. Because what do we see, good brother? We see a lot of athletes at all levels, including high school. Once they're foreclosed unwillingly, i.e., ACL, rotator cuff,
Yeah.
right? Some type of catastrophic injury, then what? You foreclose on everything else, right?
Mm,
You can't go back and retake psychology 101 and develop a relationship with your professor so they can write a recommendation for graduate school. We need to be proactive and not reactive in this game. So kind of thinking about, okay, what does this really mean?
that's good. So how if I'm a listener, how do I take this information and start applying it to athletes, whether it be at a younger age, whether it be, high school, college? What are some of the things and the tools that you have done that you can hand off and say, here is some suggestions, or here are some tools that can be utilized to support? And the term that I use is the person athlete, because to your point, you want to be able to develop the whole person. The athlete is a small part, a small
Mm,
of who we are. And so, with that, what are some tools that a listener can think about, or some knowledge, or anything that they can grasp and start utilizing?
mm.
This free
Nah,
therapy right now, y'all. This free therapy. This free therapy.
absolutely, man. I was debating if I was gonna get a book that I wrote and show it on the screen before you. But I want to talk. You said a tool, right? So a tool is mentorship, brother,
Okay.
right?
Mm,
So a lot of these young athletes, all right, and to the listeners out there, I want y'all to start thinking about mentors, right? So I'm gonna give you a couple words that mentors are unique, but these are some things that are in the same camp as a mentor, right? A coach,
mm,
right? mentor, right? Mentors and coach can be congruent in many different aspects. And to the listeners, get you more than one mentor,
Mm,
right? So you want to get you a mentor that's a scholar, right? You want to get you a mentor that talks to you about how to regulate your emotions, right? You want to get you a mentor that talks about finances, right? So you want to get you a family of mentors, right? That can aid in your development, right? Because I can give you the books to read, blah blah blah, all that other type of stuff, right? But if you want some nuts and bolts, with regards to what works, I suggest that you start there,
good.
right? Really, really looking at, because you know what? Guess what? Brother Isaiah is accessible, right? I'm accessible, right? We have social media. We have all these different ways, right, to really increase access, right, to these mentors, if you will. And that'd be a good first step, my brother. That's what I would recommend. Really, really increasing your mentorship family, if you will, or your mentorship network.
That's good. No, that's good. We had a guest on not too long ago, Marty Reed, who also wrote a book, and I'd love to hear about your book and sort of the framework and paradigm of what you're shifting with your literature. But she would say, build your roster, you know,
Correct.
build out your roster, having
Correct.
individuals on your team in different sectors to be able to learn from, to be able to grow from. One thing that I have noticed as an adult seeking mentors and or really just it's almost like you get put in proximity to people that you just learn from. You have the
Correct.
opportunity to learn from, and there is a couple things that I've learned and I like to share is one, when you get a mentor, you got to do the work. Because
Correct.
ain't nobody mentoring anybody that ain't following. You know what I mean? So
Correct.
there's a level of submission that comes along with having a mentor. There's a level of vulnerability. There's a level of work that comes along with having a mentor and
Correct.
moving in those directions. Um, and that's huge. That's huge. I had a question for you. When
Yes.
when working with athletes, Doc, when working with athletes, what are some of the similarities or the main issues that you've seen that have hindered the progress of athletes, either on the field or off the field?
Hmm.
I just came up with that one. I just came up with that one, man. I was off script.
Well, and I like it, brother. I like it, right? And I want to really unpack it for your listeners, right? That's why I'm taking just a little bit to make sure I respond to it in a way that the listeners can really follow along. So
Absolutely. Take your time.
to respond to your question, I would say this, and I'll provide some examples to kind of contextualize it, if you will. Lack of love, right?
Mm,
And how that lack of love can manifest. So let me give it to you in a few different examples, right? I have an elite footballer that I worked with, right? And there were some performance things that were going on, but a lot of what this particular individual was dealing with was stuff off the field, right? It like really feeling like, okay, when the lights are on, when those lights are hot, is when he heard the words, I love you. We
oof.
love you. We love you. Man, we really love you. When the lights were off, when an injury was present, this particular individual felt unloved,
Mm,
right? So it was that dichotomy that was causing some distress in this particular individual,
yeah.
right? And so when I'm working with that, because now I love working with athletes, right? I love it. But common themes are there's a difference between setting goals so you can make more free throws, right? Uh, On the other hand, the work around that, right, as a person who is incomplete and that sport may be their particular shelter, then we got more of a love problem
Ooh.
than we got necessarily a performance problem, if you will, right? That love problem is bleeding into that performance problem, right? So if we really want to address that performance problem, we got to address the love problem, right? And so really kind of thinking about these different components when I'm working with student athletes, right? When I'm working with elite athletes, right? I can get you a program for goal setting. I can do that tonight with my eyes closed. That's not hard at all, right? But being able to talk about some of the real underlying issues, right, is more significant when you start to think about, okay, what's really impacting performance? And
Mm.
so the love piece will be maybe the top thing, right? Because with student athletes, with athletes in general, brother, you're gonna deal with confidence, you're gonna deal with stress, you're gonna deal with focus, motivation, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not minimizing those things, right? What I'm saying is, I mean, that's, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's easy, but if that was the only thing we had to deal with when I'm working on it, man, that'd be easy work.
It'd be
But
all right.
most oftentimes that's not all that this person is dealing with.
We'd be all right, huh?
Yeah,
That's
we'd be all right, man. We'd be all right for sure.
that's
You
real.
know,
That's deep, man. That is man, that's deep. It takes me back to the scripture, man. God is love. I know that
correct,
you hang a lot of your work focusing on again the holistic well-being of not just the athlete,
correct,
any person that you deal with. And when it comes to faith, when it comes to the social, the emotional aspect, you know what I mean, the mental aspect. Um,
correct.
so that is honestly, bro, like I was not expecting you to say there's a love deficiency there, you know.
Correct.
And I would assume, and I guess the question is, or how important does that make your work as a therapist, um, to how important does that make your work with athletes,
It,
building
it makes it, it,
building the holistic person, building the holistic individual.
it's huge, bro. Um, I'm thinking of a young brother that I worked with that he was in a tough situation with a coach, but he was sending 3/4 to 50% of his scholarship check to his mom.
Mm,
You know, and
mm,
he's worried about that, right? And he's trying to hold on to his shorty,
mm,
right? And maybe 10 to 15% of his mental energy he can put on being competitive at a high major, a mid to high major, right?
mm.
And so with the question that you just asked, like, you know, those things. So when we talk about, again, if we come back to holistic, right? We can get in the gym and talk about how to focus when you at the free throw line, right? But that ain't going, that what is that gonna do? What is that gonna do about sending, half or 3/4 of your scholarship check to your mom?
Right, right. It's
And
more.
it's not because he wanted to do that, right? So it's not like he was begrudgingly doing that, right? He wanted to love on his mom in that way,
Yes, sir.
right? But worrying about, how he gonna get a crispy fade, right?
Right.
Or how he gonna put gas in his car,
Mm,
right? How's he gonna, buy his girl something nice for Valentine's Day,
right.
right? So
Mm,
forth and so on, right? Because and not to mention he had a fractured relationship with his father,
right. Deep. Yeah,
right? And so all these things come into play, good brother.
it's real. That's
You know
real.
what I mean?
I do. I wish we would have met while I was playing, honestly. Um, because I didn't start therapy until I got out of the league. Um,
Mm,
I didn't. I There was one time where I saw a sports psychologist we were running in Africa for the USA World Team.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
and years, many years ago, man. And of course, you talk about being in proximity to resources, because I was one of the fastest individuals in the country, and we were over representing the USA and Africa. It was my first time sitting down, with the sports psychologist, and we sat down and we talked about. It was an interesting experience because we literally just had a conversation, and she had me like visualizing certain things, right? Like
Correct.
she 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 had me tapping into some things that I didn't know were available to me. You know what I mean? Because of her expertise. And I was like, wow, like being able to have somebody who can really bring the best out of you, not just a coach on the field, but someone like yourself who you can sit down with and have these honest conversations about what's going on holistically, right? And really start to uncover, or really start to understand how some of these things can either grow, develop, heal, and overall make you a better person. And as you become a more healed and whole person, you become a more healed and whole athlete, right? Uh,
Correct.
and so, there was a stigma around therapy, of course. Um, Again, didn't understand the value of transparency, didn't understand the value of being able to shift your paradigm with someone who has the expertise and the resources, and the trust factor that also goes along with that. And so,
Correct.
man, there's a lot there, but I wish, I do believe that, especially our athletes that are up now, who are going through this collegiate space, who are coming up in a world of social media where there's so many different pressures to be someone, you know what I mean? To be a guy, to be him, as they say now. Um,
Yes.
foreclosed
Timothy. Be Timothy.
Himothy, be himothy, but that foreclosed on so many other aspects of their life, man. And people like you are valuable. People with your expertise are valuable, man. And I want our listeners to know that you are a resource, um, and other individuals who can help craft the entire person athlete, man, are so valuable to not
Correct.
just life during sports, but life in general. But life in general.
Correct, bro. And just when you think about that, right? And this is another ism that I learned from another black man, brother. And Dr. Parham, man, what he always taught me, right? He used to always say this to me, right? And what you were kind of painting so vividly, made me think about this is that you can't seek validation from oppressive places and or faces, bro.
Mm,
And what I mean by that as it connects to sports is that in some cases, right, the realm of athletics is not necessary unless you have somebody like me present, right? It's not designed to affirm your whole personhood,
say more, Doc.
right?
Say more, Doc.
So when we think about what we've been talking about with identity foreclosure, right? Somebody elite, like, because I gotta, I'll be honest with your listeners, bro. I wasn't nearly halfway as elite as you were, bro. You know what I mean? Which is why I went to go get a PhD and you went to the NFL, bro.
You both
You know,
part of the 1%, man. Salute.
and, and so and so when we think about it, bro, in so many areas you were being affirmed, right, to be a Philly Eagle,
Mm,
to be smashing cats on the track, right, and and that's the thing about identity foreclosure, right? What's it to the NFL, right, to put some millions, right, into some things that are set to help these young folk, um, what do I say, continue their development,
mhm,
right? Dwayne Wade said, man, I had to get a psychologist when I stopped playing hoop because I didn't know what to do with myself.
Really.
And I want to drop something else on you, brother, about identity foreclosure. I want you and the listeners to think about grief, right?
Yes.
How do we feel when we lose somebody that's important to us, right? And when we lose that identity at that elite level,
Mm.
right, we're feeling some things. We don't want to get out the bed. We don't want to talk to nobody. We want to drink. We may want to do drugs, right? We may want to have some risky behavior, right? And really kind of be able to have these upfront, explicit conversations about, okay, what does it mean, right, to not seek validation in these places that will essentially, in so many words, drop me like a hot potato, right? When I can't do nothing else for you.
Real quick.
Peace.
Real
Yeah,
quick.
peace.
Thank you.
Well,
Next.
what they say, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you, bro.
Not on the way
You know what I'm
out.
saying? Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And so those are the things when I say, okay, how is this system, right? NFL, NBA, MLB, NC2A affirming, validating? Is this a validating experience, right? Or is this an oppressive environment and I just don't know it because I'm getting the praise,
Mhm.
because I'm getting TDs, I'm dunking, I'm on ESPN, I'm in the tournament, I'm getting free merch, blah blah blah, right? And so really being able to kind of understand, like, man, why them lights do shine hot, they don't shine forever,
That's real. I
you
read a.
know.
Go ahead, brother. I'm sorry. You
No, no,
got
go ahead, brother.
got me excited because I read a study on something that you were just talking about around identity foreclosure, and there was a young man that they were interviewing, and one of the things that he said was once the game stopped, right? Once the game stopped, and quote, I didn't know how to be a regular dude. It's
Mm,
like starting over, right? Um, I feel like I can't do anything else. So I try to hang on to this sport as long as possible. It's losing your status, depressing, right? Like, again, we've singularly focused on this one thing, and once it stops, there's something else that has to take place. And I'm glad you brought up grief. Because it's you're losing something. You're losing a part of yourself. You're losing a part of yourself that you honed in on for 15 plus years. I've just now got to the point, maybe two weeks ago, I had to say to myself, you're not him anymore. You're not,
mm,
you're not, you're not the football playing Isaiah Green, Pittsburgh Steeler that you used to be. Now, what do you want to do and who do you want to become?
mm,
What's your mission now, right? Like,
mm,
what are some of the things that uh you literally have to put it to bed? I mean, it'll always be a part of who you are because you've done it. You were able to reach that goal, but it's hard to move forward if you're constantly looking back. It's hard to move forward and
mm,
recreating yourself if you're constantly holding on to, well, I used to, well, this is, I did this or I did that. You hanging on your last win. You know what I mean? And so, you talk about that identity foreclosure, and that social identity that the sport and community sort of puts on us. I know you as Isaiah Green, the athlete. I know you as, Isaiah Green, the football player. I know you as the Pittsburgh Steeler. Like, I know you as that. Like, yo, I appreciate that because there was a lot of greatness and uniqueness and eliteness that came out of that. But now it's time to re-identify myself, right? And that can be a hard topic. And so, brother, as we come to a close with this, man, I want to ask you if there's one thing, one word of wisdom, one thing of advice, one nugget of advice that you can give um, athletes that are going through the transition, what would it be?
Mm. One bit of advice to athletes in transition. If you don't quit, you'll finish.
Ooh, say more. Ooh.
Thinking about when we think about transition, it is just that it's a process, right? And earlier you spoke to tools, right? So this podcast is an example of a tool, right, that a transitioning athlete can use, right? And also, transition is never finite either,
Mm,
right? So it's always going to be a continual process, right? And if you don't quit the process of transitioning, you will come to some level of gratitude, some level of finality with regards to, okay, I'm ready to move to the next chapter, right? Finality meaning next chapter. Finality not meaning that the story is done, right? And so really kind of thinking about, okay, on the other hand, if you choose to expire, right? We never know what the next steps look like, right? You never know how that test then becomes a testimony, if you will,
mm,
right? Right. We never know the psychological and emotional resolve that you develop, you know, as a result of the transition, how that might manifest so that you can pass that story along and bless others, right? So if you don't quit, you will finish, right? And so sometimes we take ourselves out the game, right? That's like me asking you, Isaiah, was there ever a moment when you were in the throes of playing in the NFL that you was like, hey, coach, coach, take me out, please?
no, sir.
No, man. Absolutely, absolutely. So why would you check out of your journal?
Mm, yeah, yeah.
You would, and so no, and right, what I'm saying is also those tools, man, coming back to the tools, coming back to your mentors, right? Being able to say, hey, please, help me.
Here,
I have some gaps in my understanding,
yeah.
right? And if the NFL, NBA won't do it, NC2A won't do it, this is what this podcast is for,
Man,
right? We'll pick up the mantle and do it.
let's do it. Let's do it, man. Doc, you hit the nail on the head. I say this, and I say this often to anybody that I work with. Um, it's only one rule, and you don't quit. That's it. It's only one rule. You don't quit. Dr. King said, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But it's only one rule. You don't quit. And it's a
Don't quit,
journey.
man.
It's a journey. And so I want to encourage everybody who is going through the transition process or will go through the transition process. It will get tough. There will be ups and there will be downs. Um, you know, lean in on your relationships, lean in on your community, tap in with professionals like Dr. Ramar Henderson, who are there to support, listen, uplift. Um, and remember, if you don't quit, you'll finish. So
Correct.
blessings, my brother. I thank you. I appreciate your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom, your insight, and your presence. You are a blessing to me. You're a blessing to all. And salute, black man.
Yes, sir, man. Likewise, brother. Before we conclude, bro, I just want to say thank you, bro. I really enjoyed this, man, and I do believe this is only the beginning, man. And to all your listeners, man, I want to say that brother Isaiah is a brother with a big heart. He
Mm,
has a heart for service. He has a heart for change, right? So, brother, as you're on your journey, I want to continue to keep you encouraged, man.
thank you.
Right? Yeah, I want to keep you encouraged and continue to keep you not only encouraged, but encouraged to be a warrior,
Mm,
which you are. You know what I mean? And so I salute you, brother, and I appreciate the opportunity to be before you and your listeners today.
I appreciate you, man. Appreciate you, brother. Until next time.
Until next time, brother.
Yes, sir.